me just like telling the world that I'm like going to do what I want to do and that this is going to be the best thing ever. You're willing to take a risk. You're willing to deal with some pain. It does lead to creativity ultimately. So I certainly make that connection. Whenever I think of what the black says, I think of me being in the state of mind where I'm thinking like, all right, fuck what anybody thinks. I know this should exist, and I'm going to show everybody else that I'm not done. And I created this thing. It was well done, and I think it touched a lot of lives. I think a lot of people were impacted positively by that song.
Definitely. In different ways, you definitely touch people. And that is awesome.
I have touched many people.
So, hate speech, free speech, comedy, censorship, that happens nowadays.
In a weird way, what I do isn't really seen as that offensive anymore. Like it used, maybe, yeah, like racial stereotypes are not that offensive anymore. I mean, they are, but like no one really goes there. I think it's like smoking, you know? Used to be, there was a smoking section in every restaurant. And over time, smoking became a very rare thing. So I think joking about racial stereotypes, it's still a taboo. It's still kind of frowned upon, but hardly anyone does it. So it's not a big deal. But the PC police have set their target on others. They're setting their target on people who are just challenging them philosophically, people that are challenging, you know, the whole social justice, intersectionality philosophy. So interestingly, people aren't quite sure what to do with me. I think it is people that are really just like earnestly trying to challenge the social justice warriors philosophically that are now being called racist and being called Nazis. Like when I was younger, like racial stereotypes were an enormous part of comedy, like popular stand-up comedy and comedy on TV, like not just South Park, but other shows on Adult Swim, which is a channel we have in America. It's a lot of racial stereotypes and things like that were very, very big. It was a big part of comedy, and I was influenced by that. I loved it. I thought it was funny, and I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to do it bigger than it had ever been done. Today, it's become like, I think things changed a lot when Obama became president, because the opportunity to joke about race doesn't get bigger than that. Like having a black president, it just doesn't, named Hussein, whose name rhymes with Osama, it doesn't get more opportune than that. But people really, really were revered by Obama. They like comedians and everyone else, they just thought he was untouchable.
Is there such a black privilege? People were afraid of criticizing him and be accused of being racist?
Definitely, from the start, people who loved Obama would label, you know, Republicans as racist, or anyone as racist that was opposed to Obama. And Obama was saying things that should have made people concerned, saying we're going to fundamentally transform this country. For someone on the left to say that sounds like we're going to have a communist revolution. But I mean, from the start that was a thing, and of course, some people didn't like Obama because he was black. But it was always there was always kind of a certain protection around him. The first famous person to criticize Obama openly was Donald Trump. He kind of tapped into what some people were thinking. He said Obama wasn't born in America, or he was speculating. So he's always been taking advantage of kind of a lot of unspoken sentiment among kind of the everyman, or not every, but like kind of the unheard, either minority or whatever they are. So he's always been a populist. There's always been that. Look, I mean, as far as is there black privilege, is there white privilege, I think the case can be made in either case. Like somebody could say that the war on drugs disproportionately affects black people, not just black people that do drugs or sell drugs, but just a black guy walking down the street could get pulled, stopped by the police and pushed around, and he didn't do anything to deserve that. Whereas somebody white walking down the street is not going to have that. And they both might be carrying drugs on them, but the black guy is going to get stopped for it, or whatever. I mean, the case can be made, but my whole approach to that is, look, I don't know. I can't tell you who's got it better. I can offer you my solution to all of it is that individualism. We need to embrace individualism on a philosophical level, and that needs to carry out into the political level so that everyone is a person, everyone is an individual, and that is not what anyone is fighting for today. I mean, they kind of use the language of individualism when it suits them, but almost nobody is actually pushing for individualism, just that everybody is a person, everybody can and must think independently in order to live. Everybody has inalienable rights, whether it's speech or property, and that's what makes life possible. This is something you cannot live without. So there's my solution. I can't tell you exactly what's happening out in the street. Is there black privilege? Is there white privilege? Is there all these privilege? I can only tell you, look, here's my solution. Here's what I'm offering is individualism, and that is possible. It is not. There's not this invisible force of collectivism. There's not some attachment to your in-group that people talk about. This is something they learn in college, either directly or indirectly through the media. I mean, this stuff all comes out of college. And like I mentioned earlier, philosophers in recent times, and really most philosophers, have not quite understood what consciousness is, how consciousness works, and what free will means. So these are questions that need to be answered. And that is what kind of allows us to approach all these other issues, understanding what a person is.
Yeah, it's really interesting. No, it's like kind of a racial wars coming sometimes from the blacks talking about the white privilege and the races that they say that we cannot even understand that they encounter on the streets. And when it comes to being to oh, the whites are racist, I try to do the methodology of trying to apply some epistemology on their method and try to turn it around, and it sometimes doesn't work, because there is some dissonance related there. It's like, oh yeah, I can understand how you have white privilege, because I'm saying that because I have had this conversation with some people accusing me from being white supremacist. It's like, I'm clearly not white to start. That is the funny thing. The funny part is that me being attacked of being a white supremacist is clearly I'm not white to start, but yeah, I think it's interesting because sometimes it's talking on the phone, so people oh, you can't understand because you're white, and I can understand you, and it's so we are in some type of in position that we're blind, and we don't have empathy or understand other people's position, but they are in that position that they see everything.
Look, I mean, all of these ideas have their root in the university. They all come from philosophy. So, when did this whole issue of black anything like that, blacks seeing themselves as part of a race and that this is an important part of their identity, where did this come from? The blacks were they were moving towards individualism a long time ago, before the 50s, before the 60s. And so was everyone else. They were moving towards individualism. And it was the intellectuals, both the black intellectuals in their communities, but also the white ones in the colleges, who told black people, you should think of yourself as part of this race. There's no such thing as independent thought. There's no such thing as individual rights that trump group rights. The philosophers rejected reason outright. You hear them talk about postmodernism. That's what this was. Postmodernism says there is no reason, but also most of the
possible.
So when you can't think rationally, when you can't look at the world objectively, then what's left? The group. You just turn to the easiest thing, which is your group. So, I mean, these things do come from the philosophical roots. I mean, this does come from somewhere, but most people who are fighting against postmodernism, most people who are saying they're against postmodernism, what they're offering alternately is no better. They're offering just whatever was a little kind of popular before postmodernism, which is biological determinism, saying that you're shaped by your genes, which again leads you to racism, or it leads you to something other than individualism, biological determinism, or they kind of try to blend nature and nurture, saying it's your environment that shapes you, or it's your genes, or it's a mixture of the two. But really, it's philosophy. It's the ideas and what you come to believe about what's true and how you should behave, what's the proper course of action that affects you both internally and your actions externally. So only objectivism, only Ayn Rand's philosophy solves this problem. And it's, in a weird way, in a sad sort of irony, she kind of delivers this philosophy basically at the time that all the intellectuals in America are pushing away reason in the most major way, like as postmodernism becomes like the new norm philosophically. Ayn Rand's objectivism is offered. Not that the previous generation probably would have accepted it either, but it's extra tragic that as Ayn Rand like solves all these philosophical problems, philosophy itself gets thrown in the trash, in the most major slam dunk.
What's your view on determinism?
There is none. We all have a biology for sure, but we also, as human beings, we are conscious, and you have a choice to focus or not. So that is what free will is. Free will doesn't mean you have options that you have no access to. So if you tell me to solve a math equation and I can't solve it, you say, oh, see, you don't have you're determined, you don't have all the options in front of you. Within the options that you have in front of you. So look, everyone has a certain maybe capacity intellectually. Everyone has a certain genetic disposition. But as far as the choice to focus or not, that is completely up to the individual. It's something that, parents should teach their kids to do. A good education should and would teach a child to focus and to consider his options and then act according to that, and make decisions. But determinism is absolutely wrong to say that they're trying to be scientific. They're trying to say, oh, everything has a cause, so therefore a human decision has a cause as well. Yes, but the cause of a human decision is the conscious choice to focus.
It's a process of mind. Yeah.
And this is, by the way, they laugh at you if you say this in a university. They laugh at you in most universities, in most environments.
Yeah.
Usually the only people who still believe in free will are religious. So they believe free will is a supernatural phenomenon. They're, Catholic or whatever. But Ayn Rand solves this problem. She says there is free will and it is scientific. There is evidence of it. It's one of the first things that are evident to you. Existence is evident, and your own consciousness. Everything you observe beyond that contains within it these two axioms: existence and consciousness. And your consciousness, if you introspect, if you acknowledge your own consciousness, you see very easily that you have the choice to focus. Like right now, I can look at you, or I can just look away, start to drift away. I can start to ignore what's happening, or I can focus maybe on the color of your shirt. I can focus on the color of the wall behind you. So I can choose what to focus on. I can continue to think about what I'm going to say next, or I can just completely shut my mind off and just start either change the topic or just completely start to hum a tune in my head. So that choice to focus is free will.
So there is the objectivism in your individualism and your thoughts, on a way of if I ask you which ice cream you would like to have, and you still gonna have a very determined options because of the things that you could not choose anything out of what you know.
So that's not really determinism. I mean, they use that as a trick to say, oh, see, you can't name something you've never heard of, and you can't so basically they're holding omniscience as the standard. This is how the religious mentality is still prevalent in our culture, even though we're mostly a scientific minded culture in the West, but we still look at philosophical questions as though God exists. So either you know everything at once from all possible angles, you're omniscient, you're God, or you're completely determined. No, The choices are in front of you. The choices that you know of, the choices that you're able to contemplate are what you have to choose from. But the decision that you make is a decision. You can focus and consider it and choose it. But what they're trying to say is, or what determinism says is that the decision that you make was predetermined based on everything that happened to you up until you like. But that's just not true. No matter what happened to you, you can still stop and focus. So look, people are going to have a different menu presented to them, a different plethora of options at any given time and place in history, or at their level of intelligence, or whatever it is. There's going to be a finite amount of options, but having a set amount of finite options is not determinism. And again, they're using omniscience as the standard. So keep an eye out for that. And this is modern philosophy. The more I learn about this, the more it makes sense to me that philosophers in the Enlightenment, and certainly after the Enlightenment, since then, they say they hold omniscience as the standard, and they're really doing the same thing with omnipotence, right? Like, you're saying you can't know everything and then choose from all these different things. You can't do everything at once, so therefore you're determined. That's just not true. As a human being, you're only approaching these questions as a human being. You have a certain nature, you have a certain identity, a certain type of consciousness, certain sense organs that interact with the world. You have a certain finite nature. So the only reason to consider these questions are from the standpoint of a human being in this reality, on this planet. And now you say, okay, I have the choice to focus, so I have free will. I'm going to use it. That is not, there's no determinism in there.
Cool. Religiosity. Are you an atheist? You call yourself an atheist, agnostic, and
not agnostic for sure. So I don't. Yeah, people. So I mean, remember I said how modern thinkers, they hold omniscience as the standard. So even Sam Harris, he says, I'm almost certain that there's no God. I'm almost certain. So even though he's an atheist, he can't quite bring himself, like, he needs to be an agnostic atheist. But no, if something is, first of all, if it's arbitrary, so there's no evidence of it, there's no reason to entertain this, but someone just proposed there's a God, you can throw it away. You don't even need to acknowledge it. So it's arbitrary. You don't even give it the time of day rationally. And then if something is contradictory, so the idea of God is contradictory. It contradicts itself because everything has a nature, everything has an identity. And this God is not limited by his own identity. He's supernatural. He's not confined by his own nature. So God cannot exist. So I wouldn't say I'm agnostic. I would say there is no God for a number of reasons, and I just hit on two of them. But I understand the role that God plays in lives of people. Mainly, God the idea of God offers an integrating factor. An integrating factor. People need to tie everything together. They need their actions to have some sort of central purpose, and they need their belief to be in some sort of system. We're not just infants just going from, just reacting to sensations. We do need to think. And then the idea of God, it kind of says, okay, everything is because of God. Everything is because of God. And then what you should do is what God says, or something like that. So I see the purpose that it plays. And I've gone into this topic on my commentary channel in a series called How to Live Sober, where I've helped people by using my own experience reconcile the 12-step program with objectivism, and showing how, just as the Enlightenment thinker, like the Age of Reason thinkers, like the founding fathers of America, a lot of them believed in God, but that was not what makes them stand out. What makes them stand out was their respect for nature, with their respect for the individual's capacity to think and to judge, and his necessity to live by his own judgment. That's what makes them stand out. To them, God was just kind of how they tied it all together. And I think the same is true with Aristotle to a certain degree. My understanding is Aristotle also had a prime mover. Like when he was out of options, like when he was out of answers, he just said, there's a prime mover tying it all together, causing everything, I suppose. So too, today, to a person who is trying to stay sober, the 12-step program says, pick a higher power. And what that really means is, I think, kind of pick something to put everything into this category, everything under this umbrella. And objectivism kind of offers that in a more consistent way, in a way that allows you not only to have a so-called higher power, which is reality, but also gives you a moral code and a fully consistent epistemology that allows you to really, really flourish to the maximum potential. So whenever anyone asks me about God, I want to go into that I'm not dismissive of the idea like it's just some fairy tale that someone came up with. I mean, it is, but the reason it's important to people is because it offers people spirituality. It offers people a role for their consciousness to play in life. Because the alternative to religion should not be just materialism. It should not just be to reject consciousness altogether. It is evident that we are conscious as individuals. Yeah.